The colony of New Carthage was a quiet place. It sat on the edge of known space, far from the busy trade routes and the big political meetings of the Galactic Council. Around 40,000 people lived there. Most of them were farmers, engineers, and teachers. Some were children who had never seen Earth. They had built homes, schools, and small markets out of red dust and hard work. New Carthage was not rich or powerful. It was simply alive. That changed on a Tuesday morning. Commander Layla Osei was drinking coffee in the colony's small defense tower when the first alarm went off. She put the cup down slowly, as if she already knew that picking it up again would mean nothing had happened. The radar screen showed 7 ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel on the far side of the planet's moon. They were not human ships. They were long and gray, with flat front ends, and no markings that matched anything in the database. Layla called her 2 officers in. They stood behind her and looked at the screen. "Are they talking to us?" one of them asked. "No," Layla said. The ships moved in a straight line toward the colony. No communication, no warning signal, no request to land or identify themselves. They simply came, and they came fast. Layla sent out an emergency broadcast to the Galactic Council frequency, to Earth's nearest naval station 4 light hours away, and to the colony speakers. She told everyone to go underground. Most of them were already asleep. The first strike hit at 5:47 in the morning, local time. 3 of the colony's 7 districts were hit in the first pass. The ships did not fire weapons like missiles or bombs. They used directed energy, wide beams of focused heat that turned buildings into ash in seconds. District 2, where most of the schools were, took a direct hit. District 5, the farming zone, burned completely. District 1, the oldest part of New Carthage, where the first settlers had built their homes by hand, was gone before anyone could run. The colony had 4 surface guns, old and underpowered, built for small threats. She used all of them. The shots hit 2 of the enemy ships and did nothing. The ships did not even change direction. They turned around, came back, and hit 3 more districts. In 11 minutes, 37,000 people were dead. The 3,000 who survived were the ones who made it underground in time, or who had been working in the deep mining tunnels below the surface. Layla was one of them. She sat in the dark with 60 people she did not know, listening to the colony burn above her head. The heat came through the rock walls. She held a child who was not her own, and waited. When it stopped, she climbed out. There was nothing left above the ground that still looked like a place where people had lived. The Galactic Council convened within 18 hours. It was the fastest emergency session in the Council's 600 years of existence. Representatives from 17 species filled the great round chamber on the station above the planet Verath. The hall was enormous, built to make every species feel small and equal at the same time. Light came from everywhere and nowhere. Voices were translated by machines before they finished being spoken. Ambassador Yael Okafor arrived from Earth 2 hours after the session started. She was 53 years old, with short gray hair, and a face that had smiled many times, but was not smiling now. She walked to the human seat without looking at any of the other representatives. She sat down. She listened. The Velthari ambassador spoke first. The Velthari were the species whose ships had destroyed New Carthage, though no one in the chamber said that directly yet. Their ambassador was tall and pale, with 4 long arms, and eyes that moved independently of each other. His name, translated into sounds a human throat could make, came out as something close to Sereth. Sereth said that the attack had been a tragic error. He said the colony had been broadcasting signals that the Dominion's long-range scanners interpreted as territorial aggression markers. He said the ships had acted on standing orders that were never meant to apply to a populated world. He said the Velthari Dominion was prepared to open a full investigation, offer a formal expression of deep regret, and enter into immediate negotiations to discuss reparations. He spoke for 20 minutes. His voice was calm. His 4 hands were folded on the table in front of him. 3 other species spoke after him. They all said the same things in different words. A terrible misunderstanding. A moment for reason. a chance for healing. The council moderator, a Tavari with feathers along his collar, asked Ambassador Okafor if Earth was prepared to enter the mediation process. Yael Okafor stood up. She did not look at her notes. She did not look at Sereth. She looked at the center of the room, at no one and everyone. 37,000 people are dead, she said. Her voice did not shake. They were sleeping when it happened. Some of them were children. None of them were soldiers. None of them were carrying weapons. None of them had ever met a Velthari in their lives. She paused for a moment. We have heard the explanation. We have heard the word misunderstanding. We have heard the word reparations. We have heard what the Velthari Dominion is prepared to offer. She looked around the room slowly. We are not interested. The Tavari moderator leaned forward. Ambassador, the council strongly encourages all parties to— We do not negotiate with those who murder our people, Yael said. That is the position of Earth. That is the position of every human being alive. We are not here to make a deal. We are here to inform you of what will happen next. She picked up her small case and stepped back from the podium. Earth will respond to this attack. We will not ask for permission. We will not submit a timeline to the council for review. We will respond. If you want to know what that looks like, watch. She walked out of the chamber. For a long moment, no one spoke. The sound of her footsteps faded. Then everyone spoke at once. Back on what remained of New Carthage, Commander Layla Osei stood in the open air where District 2 used to be. The ground was still warm beneath her boots. A rescue team from a nearby station had arrived 6 hours ago, but there was very little to rescue. Mostly they were taking photographs and collecting data, figuring out what had been here. A young soldier from the rescue team walked up beside her. He was maybe 20 years old, and his face had the look of someone who had read about bad things, but never seen them. Did they say why? He asked. Layla looked at the flat black ground that used to be a school. They said it was a mistake, she said. The young soldier was quiet for a moment. What does Earth say? Layla had seen the broadcast from the council chamber. She had watched it 3 times in the rescue team's communications tent. She had watched Yael Okafor walk out of that enormous room with her small case and her straight back. Earth says watch, Layla told him. She looked up at the sky. It was clear and empty now. But she knew with a kind of certainty that sits in the chest rather than the mind, that it would not stay that way. The Galactic Council had seen many wars. In 600 years of operation, the Council had watched species fight over planets, over trade routes, over old insults that had grown into holy causes. It had seen slow wars that lasted generations, and fast wars that ended in days. It knew how wars started. A threat, a response, a longer threat, a bigger response. It was a pattern. The Council knew the pattern well. It knew how to step in, where to put pressure, which side needed to feel respected before it would sit down. What happened in the 72 hours after Ambassador Okafor walked out of the chamber did not fit the pattern. It did not fit any pattern the Council had ever seen. The Tavari elder Mozath had lived for 240 years. He had served on the Galactic Council for 80 of them. He had negotiated 9 ceasefires and helped end 4 major armed conflicts. He was widely considered the best diplomat alive in any known species. When his young aide woke him 4 hours after the council session ended, he was annoyed. When his aide showed him the feed from Earth's naval communication network, he was quiet for a very long time. How long has this been going on? Mozath asked. We think they started within an hour of Ambassador Okafor leaving the chamber, his aide said. Mozath watched the feed. Every human naval yard in the Proxima cluster had switched to full wartime production. Ships that had been listed as reserve status, vessels that the Council's intelligence assessments had described as ceremonial or lightly armed, were being moved out of dock and fitted with new equipment. Supply chains that normally carried food and building materials to outer colonies had been rerouted. Fuel depots were being filled to maximum capacity. Deep space communication nodes were shifting to encrypted military frequencies. What does our assessment say about human military strength? Mozath asked. His aide pulled up the document. It was 3 years old. It gave the human fleet a threat rating of Class 3. Significant for a young species, not comparable to the major powers, unlikely to project force beyond 2 or 3 systems. Mosath looked at the document for a moment. Then he looked back at the feed. 3 strike groups were already forming outside Mars Station. A 4th was gathering near the colony of Kepler's Rest. A 5th was being assembled from ships that had been scattered across 9 different systems, called back on a single order. "Update the assessment," he said, "and mark it urgent." The species of the Galactic Council had been watching humanity for just under 200 years, since humans first broke the light barrier and started pushing out into space. In that time, most species had formed opinions about what humans were. Energetic, most said, creative, somewhat unpredictable, prone to strong emotion, historically violent with each other, though they seemed to have largely moved past that. Young, all of them agreed, very young, a species still finding its shape. What almost no one had fully understood was the history. Humans had spent thousands of years in conflict with themselves. They had invented hundreds of ways to fight, to organize armies, to project power across land and sea, and eventually sky. Every time a new technology appeared, humans had figured out how to use it to fight within a generation. They had also figured out how to survive being fought. They had been bombed, burned, starved, and scattered more times than most species had experienced a single major war, and they had kept going. The Council's analysts knew this, in the way that someone knows a fact they read in a book. What they had not understood was what that history had built inside the species itself. Humans did not think about war the way younger species thought about it, as a terrible thing that might someday happen. Humans had something older and harder in them, a readiness, not eagerness, not desire, just the deep, quiet knowledge of what had to be done when the time came, and how to do it. No one outside Earth had known that. The Velthari Dominion's intelligence director, a sharp and careful official named Vorith, had been awake for 30 hours straight when the 3rd update came in. Each update was worse than the last. She sat in her office and read them in order, which she later thought was a mistake. Reading them out of order might have softened the shock. The first update told her that human naval production had increased by 600% in 48 hours. She had assumed the number was an error and asked for verification. It was not an error. The second update told her that 3 reserve fleets had been activated, and that their weapons loadout was not, as previously classified, light patrol armament. It was full combat configuration. Someone had stored these ships ready to fight, and told no one outside the human military. The third update told her that a human admiral named Reza Nazari had been appointed commander of the 1st Expeditionary Force, and that the 1st Expeditionary Force was already moving toward the Velthari border. Vorith called her senior staff together. She showed them the same updates. One of them said what all of them were thinking. "We were wrong about them." "Yes," Vorith said. "How wrong?" She looked at the size of the fleet now forming on the long-range scanners. "Completely," she said. "We were completely wrong." On the council station, the representatives who had spoken after the Velthari ambassador were having a difficult few days. They had recommended calm, they had used the word dialogue. They had trusted that humans, being a reasonable species, would understand that negotiation was the right path. The right path was always negotiation. 600 years of council history said so. But they kept watching the feeds. And what they saw was not a species preparing to negotiate. What they saw was a species that had been waiting, with great patience, for a reason to show the galaxy what it actually was. And now, it had its reason. And the reason had 37,000 names. The Council sent 3 separate messages to Earth's government in those 72 hours. The first asked for clarification on the fleet movements. The second asked Earth to hold its position until a full investigation could be completed. The third, more urgent than the others, warned that military action without Council sanction could destabilize the entire region. Each message received the same reply. One line, from an automated government system that had clearly been set up for exactly this situation. Earth has noted your message. Nothing else. Mosath stood at the wide observation window of his private office and watched the stars. His aide stood behind him, waiting. The Velthari ambassador wants to know if we can restart talks, his aide said. What talks? Mosath replied. Ambassador Okafor ended the talks. He's asking if we can restart them. Mosath was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, space was the same as it always was. Vast and dark and full of distances that made every problem seem small. Except some problems were not small. Some problems were exactly as large as they looked. Tell him we are working on it, Mosath said. He did not believe that, but he was still a diplomat. He turned from the window and sat down at his desk. He opened a blank document and began to write a classified assessment. He had written hundreds of these in his career. They were usually careful and measured. This one was different. He wrote, "We have made a serious error in our understanding of the human species. We read their history as evidence of chaos and instability. We should have read it as evidence of endurance and capacity. We treated their restraint as weakness. It was not weakness. It was choice. They chose until now not to show us what they were. New Carthage has ended that choice. We are not watching a young species lash out. We are watching a very old kind of power wake up." He marked it for the eyes of the full council. Then he looked at the fleet movements again, at the numbers and the distances and the speed, and he thought about what came next. Admiral Reza Nazari had never wanted to be famous. He was a tall, quiet man from a small city in Iran who had joined the Navy at 19 and spent the next 30 years learning how to move ships through space without being seen. He was good at it. He was also good at thinking 3 steps ahead of people who thought they were thinking 2 steps ahead of him. His officers respected him. His enemies, when he had any, usually didn't know he was there until it was already over. He stood on the bridge of the flagship Perseverance and looked at the Velthari border on the tactical map. It was marked in red on the display. Across it, on the other side, were the ships and stations and military installations of the Velthari Dominion. Some of them were very large. Some of them were very well armed. He was not afraid of them. He was simply thinking. "Sir," said Lieutenant Commander Amara Park, his tactical officer, "the Council has transmitted another message. They are asking us to hold position and await further diplomatic guidance." "Log it," Nazari said. "Should we respond?" "Log it," he said again. He looked at the map for another minute. Then he said, "Take us across." The galaxy expected blood. Not just the Council, but every species that had been watching the feed. Every intelligence analyst who had been tracking the fleet's movements. Every journalist on every world that had picked up the story. They expected humans to cross the border and burn everything they could reach. That was what a species that refused to negotiate was supposed to do. That was the logic of anger. You hit back harder than you were hit. You made the pain stop by making a bigger pain somewhere else. The 1st Expeditionary Force crossed the Velthari border at 0300 hours, ship time. The first target was the Velthari military shipyard at Korath Station. It was one of the largest shipyards in the Dominion, capable of building and housing over 300 warships at a time. The attack lasted 40 minutes. When it was over, every ship in dock had been destroyed. Every construction crane had been reduced to scrap, and every weapon storage facility had been hit with precision charges that left nothing functional. The worker housing blocks, the medical center, the civilian transit hub on the station's south side, untouched. Every one of them. The Galactic Council observers who had been watching the feed could not believe what they were seeing. They called their analysts. They asked for confirmation. The confirmation came back clean. The humans had gone out of their way to avoid hitting anything that was not a direct military asset. "This is intentional," one analyst wrote in a message that got widely shared across the Council network. "This is not restraint born from weakness or lack of opportunity. They are doing this on purpose." Admiral Nazari had given his captains a document before they crossed the border. It was 4 pages long. It was called the Target Doctrine. The first page said in plain language, "We are not here to conquer. We are not here to occupy. We are not here to punish civilians for the decisions of their leaders. We are here to destroy the capacity of the Velthari Dominion to make war. Nothing else." The second page listed the target categories: military shipyards, command stations, weapons production facilities, ammunition depots, long-range weapons platforms, active warships. The third page listed what was never to be touched under any circumstances: civilian housing, medical facilities, food production or distribution infrastructure, water systems, schools, any structure whose primary purpose was not military. The fourth page had one sentence on it: "Every action we take in this campaign is being recorded and will be submitted to the Galactic Council in full. We have nothing to hide and no apologies to make." On the third day, the Velthari attempted a counter-offensive. They sent 2 battle groups, 46 ships total, to intercept the Perseverance and its escort fleet near the border system of Veth Karis. Under normal circumstances, against most species they had fought, it would have been enough. The battle lasted 2 hours and 50 minutes. When it ended, 31 Velthari ships had been destroyed and 12 had been disabled. 3 had managed to retreat. The human fleet lost 1 ship, a frigate called the Steadfast, hit by a weapons burst from 2 directions at once. 62 crew members died. Admiral Nazari noted their names in his personal log. He had been doing this since New Carthage, writing names. He was not sure why. Maybe because it felt wrong to let the numbers be just numbers. After the battle, a Velthari admiral named Dreth sent a ceasefire request through standard military channels. Nazari read it. Dreth used the word mutual twice and the word honor 3 times. He asked that both sides agree to step back and allow talks to take place. Nazari wrote back. He wrote 4 words: "We haven't finished yet." He sent it and went back to the tactical map. Under normal circumstances, against most species they had fought, it would have been enough. The battle lasted 2 hours and 50 minutes. When it ended, 31 Velthari ships had been destroyed, but because of how the success was being achieved. The documented care, the live feeds from Council observers that showed repeatedly human ships going around civilian targets, adjusting attack angles, calling off strikes when the risk of non-military damage was too high. A young journalist on the Teveri homeworld wrote a piece that got read 3 billion times in 2 days. She wrote, "We spent 200 years watching humans, and we thought we understood them. We thought we saw a species that had survived its own violence, and was trying to be better. We were not wrong about that. We were just wrong about what better meant to them. To humans, better does not mean forgetting what they are capable of. It means choosing when to use it, and how." The piece made a lot of species uncomfortable. It was supposed to. Back on Earth, in the long, quiet halls of the government building in Geneva, Ambassador Yael Okafor read the daily battle reports and said very little. She had people bring her coffee, and she drank it and she looked at the numbers and the maps. Others in the building were louder. Some were worried about the council's reaction. Some were worried about escalation. Some were worried about what happened after. Yael was not worried about those things. She was thinking about them, which was different. Worry was unfocused. What she was doing was focused. Her assistant came in one afternoon and said that 3 council members had requested a private conversation with her. Not a formal session, just a conversation. "Tell them I'm available in 2 days, Yael said. 2 days, her assistant said. He looked uncertain. They said it was quite urgent. 2 days, she said again. They can use the time to think about what they want to say. Her assistant left. Yael looked back at the battle reports. The Dominion's western shipyards were gone. The command station at Veth Karis was gone. The long-range weapons platforms near the border, 4 of them, which the Dominion had used to project power across 3 systems for 20 years, were gone. The lesson was being delivered. She wanted the Dominion, and the whole watching galaxy, to have a little more time to feel it, before anyone started talking. 2 days was not long, but it was long enough to make a point. The Velthari Dominion had been built over 300 years through a combination of military force and political pressure. It was not one species, but many. At its center were the Velthari themselves, gray-skinned, four-armed, proud of their long history and their long reach. Around them, in rings of decreasing power, were 5 vassal species who had been absorbed into the Dominion at various points over the centuries. They paid taxes, they provided soldiers, they followed Dominion law. In exchange, they received protection and access to trade routes. The arrangement had worked because the Dominion was strong. When you are protected by something strong, you do not ask too many questions about what the strong thing does in your name. But now, the strong thing was losing. The Chethari were the smallest of the Dominion's vassal species. They lived on 2 planets near the border, and they had been part of the Dominion for 80 years. In those 80 years, they had sent 40,000 of their young people to serve in Velthari military campaigns, and they had lost 12,000 of them. The Chethari Governing Council met in secret for 3 days after the battle at Veth Karis. They had watched the human fleet's feeds, the same ones the whole galaxy was watching. They had seen what humanity was targeting and what it was leaving alone. They had done quiet calculations. The Dominion's western shipyards, gone. The command stations, gone. The border weapons platforms, gone. The things that had made the Dominion feel like protection, gone or going. On the 4th day, the Chethari Governing Council sent a message directly to the Galactic Council, bypassing Dominion channels entirely. The message said that the Chethari wished to formally declare their neutrality in the current conflict, that they considered themselves no longer bound by Dominion military obligations, and that they were requesting independent recognition under the Council's membership framework. 2 other vassal species sent similar messages within the week. The Dominion's leadership reacted with fury and threats. No one was particularly afraid of Velthari threats right now. Inside the Dominion itself, the fractures were worse. The Velthari War Council had 9 members. They had been the ones who authorized the strike on New Carthage. They had done it because their long-range intelligence had flagged the colony as a forward observation post, a report that had turned out to be wrong, generated by a mid-level analyst who had misread the colony's communication signals. The analyst had been arrested, but the 9 members of the War Council had given the order, and they were still free, and they were not in agreement about what to do next. 4 of them wanted to escalate. They believed that backing down would destroy the Dominion's reputation permanently. They argued that the human fleet was overextended, that a full mobilization of Dominion forces could overwhelm it, that the right move was to push back hard and make humanity pay a cost that made further attacks unattractive. 3 of them wanted to negotiate. They had watched the battle reports with growing dread. They had seen the numbers. They had seen how fast the human fleet moved, how precisely it struck, and how quickly it adapted when the Velthari tried something unexpected. These 3 had begun to understand, quietly and without saying it too loudly, that they had made a very serious mistake. The last 2 wanted to run. The private meeting in Geneva lasted 4 hours. Mosath attended personally, which was unusual. He usually sent representatives to preliminary discussions. The fact that he came himself told Yale something. She served him tea, which he drank with 2 of his 4 hands, and she sat across from him and waited. He made his case carefully. He was good at making cases carefully. It was the work of a lifetime. He laid out what he called a path to resolution. The Dominion had agreed, in principle, to significant reparations. A formal apology at the full council session was possible. An independent investigation into the attack, with council observers, could be arranged. These were, Mosath said gently, meaningful concessions. These were the things that normally ended conflicts. She took no notes. She drank her tea. When Mosath finished, she set down her cup. "I understand what you are offering," she said. "I want you to understand that it is not what we are asking for." Mosath was quiet. "We are asking for 4 things," Yael said. "Specifically 4. First, The 4 members of the Velthari War Council who gave the direct order for the strike on New Carthage are to be handed to a neutral tribunal. Not a Dominion tribunal, not a council-mediated review. A tribunal with real authority to try, convict, and sentence. Second, the Dominion formally acknowledges, in public and in full, that the strike was not a misunderstanding and was not an error. It was an illegal military attack on a civilian population. Third, the Dominion funds the complete rebuilding of New Carthage to full capacity, without conditions. Fourth, an independent monitoring body, with council oversight and human representation, is established to audit Dominion military activities for a period of no less than 20 years. She paused. When those 4 things are agreed to, and when the 4 members of the War Council are in custody, we will discuss a permanent end to military operations. Not before. Mosath looked at her for a long time. His eyes, which moved independently of each other, were both looking at her now. That was unusual. It meant his full attention. The surrender of sitting government officials to an external tribunal, he said carefully, is without precedent. Yes, Yael said. A lot of what has happened recently is without precedent. The news of what Earth was demanding reached the Velthari War Council within hours. The 4 members who had wanted to escalate were now the loudest voices in the room. They called it an insult. They called it a violation of sovereignty. They called it the behavior of the species that had no respect for the order of the galaxy. The 3 who had wanted to negotiate were very quiet now. They had been doing private mathematics for several days. The mathematics said that the Dominion had lost, in 10 days of fighting, more military capacity than it had lost in the previous 50 years. The mathematics said that the human fleet was still moving. The mathematics said that the War Council's options were narrowing. One of those 3 made a decision in the middle of the night. His name was Varen, and he was old, and he had spent 30 years in the Dominion's military before joining the Council. He made a call to a contact in the Galactic Council's back-channel network. He said that he was prepared to cooperate. He did not say with what. He did not need to. Everyone understood. Commander Layla Osei had been reassigned from New Carthage to a desk in the Navy's after-action review office on Kepler's Rest. She was supposed to be writing reports. She spent a lot of time watching the news feeds instead. She watched the Chitauri Declaration. She watched the diplomatic meetings. She watched the growing cracks in the Dominion, spreading like ice breaking in a spring river. She thought about the school in District 2. She thought about the child she had held in the dark while the ground above them burned. She had learned later that the child's name was Petra, and that Petra had found her mother and her father were both gone, and that she was now living with an aunt on a station near Jupiter. Layla was not a political person. She did not follow Galactic Council procedure or understand all the layers of what was happening between Earth and the Dominion. But she understood one thing clearly. She had watched Ambassador Okafor's words spread across the galaxy. She had watched the fleet move. She had watched the Dominion shake. There was going to be an answer. Not a deal, not a compromise, an answer. She went back to her reports. She wrote them carefully, accurately, and without leaving anything out. It felt like the right thing to do. History should know exactly what happened here. The first 2 members of the Velthari War Council were handed over by Varen, the old soldier who had made his quiet call in the middle of the night. He arranged it carefully, using back channels that had taken him weeks to map. He moved the 2 officials, a general named Kathos and a policy director named Shen, from their secured residences to a neutral station on the edge of Dominion space. He used a private transport and 3 people he trusted. The Velthari Dominion's internal security found out 3 days later and called it treason. Varen was in protective custody with the Galactic Council by then and did not seem to care what they called it. The other 2 members of the War Council were harder. One of them, a military logistics officer named Pyrith, had gone into hiding inside the Dominion the moment Earth's 4 demands became public. He was smart and careful, and he had connections. He moved every 48 hours. His location was classified inside the Dominion's own security apparatus, and very few people knew where he was at any given time. Human special forces found him anyway. The operation took 11 days to plan and 6 minutes to execute. A team of 8 people, moving in a ship that looked like a routine maintenance vessel, landed at a small station in the Outer Dominion on a Tuesday afternoon. They were in and out before the station's security forces understood what had happened. Pyrath was aboard the Perseverance by midnight. Admiral Nazari noted the time in his log. He did not celebrate. He had the prisoner secured and treated according to the rules of lawful custody, and he sent a message to Geneva saying it was done. The fourth and final member of the War Council, a civilian administrator named Dren, who had authorized the funding for the strike, surrendered voluntarily the following morning. She had watched Pyrath's capture on the news feeds. She asked for a lawyer and a guarantee of fair treatment. Both were provided. She walked onto the council shuttle in clean clothes, carrying a small bag, and sat down without speaking. The Galactic Tribunal had never existed before. It had to be built from nothing in 12 days, which was either a remarkable achievement or a terrifying sign of how fast things were moving, depending on who you asked. Mozath and a team of legal experts from 5 species worked nearly around the clock to produce a framework. Rules of evidence, standards as proof, procedures for the accused to present their case, limits on what the tribunal could order. Earth's legal team had sent their own document first. It was 63 pages long. It was detailed, precise, and left very little room for the kinds of procedural delays that could quietly extend a trial for 20 years. The Council's lawyers had argued with some of it. Earth's lawyers had argued back, patiently and specifically. And in most cases, they had won the argument because they had thought through their positions more carefully than anyone else in the room. They came prepared, one council lawyer said to Mozath afterward, in a tone of tired admiration. They always come prepared, Mozath said. We just didn't know it until recently. The trial lasted 6 weeks. All 4 of the accused were represented by lawyers of their choosing. All 4 had the opportunity to present evidence, call witnesses, and respond to charges. The charges were detailed and specific. The unlawful, deliberate attack on a civilian population, the knowing use of lethal force against non-combatants, the failure to issue any warning or attempt any communication before the strike, and the deaths of 37,000 named individuals, each of whose names was entered into the trial record. The reading of the names alone took 4 hours. 2 of the accused argued that they had acted within Dominion law and that the tribunal had no authority over them. The tribunal noted their argument and proceeded. One argued that the attack had been a genuine error and that he had not known the colony was civilian. The evidence showed that the Dominion's intelligence had flagged the colony as civilian 2 weeks before the strike, and that the flag had been seen and signed by 3 of the 4. One said nothing at all, and let her lawyer speak for her. The verdicts came on the 41st day. All 4 were found guilty. The sentences were not death. Earth had not asked for death. The sentences were permanent exile from any position of government or military authority, 40 years of enforced service in rebuilding the worlds the Dominion's campaigns had damaged over the previous decades, and a formal requirement to contribute personal testimony to a permanent historical record so that the events of New Carthage would not be denied, minimized, or forgotten. The galaxy had expected executions. The lack of them was somehow more frightening. It said something about humanity that many species found difficult to name but impossible to dismiss. 3 days after the verdict, Admiral Nazari gave the order to withdraw. The first expeditionary force turned around and went home. No ceremony, no victory parade, no speech. Nazari wrote a short message to his fleet that went out on the internal network. It said, "The work is done. You did it well. Come home." That was all. The Dominion watched the fleet leave. No one fired on it. No one said anything. The Velthari War Council was gone. The vassal species that had declared neutrality were filing for full council membership. The Dominion itself was still there, but it was smaller now, and quieter, and it had a 20-year monitoring agreement to comply with, and a rebuilding project to fund. On New Carthage, the first construction teams arrived 3 months after the trial ended. They were paid by the Dominion under the terms of the rebuilding agreement. The colony's survivors, the 3,000 who had made it underground, and the hundreds more who had been off-world that morning, were given the choice of whether to return. About half of them did. Commander Layla Osei was one of them. She had put in a formal request to be reassigned to the Reconstruction Oversight Office, which was a desk job, which she did not care about. She wanted to be there. She stood in the open space where District 2 used to be, and watched the first construction machines break ground. The air smelled like turned earth and metal. The sky was the same color it had always been, a particular shade of dark blue that she had liked before and still liked now. A small girl was standing a few meters away, also watching the machines. Layla did not recognize her at first. Then she did. It was Petra. The girl's aunt had brought her back. She was 11 now. She stood very straight, watching the ground being turned over, her face calm in the way that children are calm when they have already cried everything out, and what is left is something harder and more permanent. Layla walked over and stood beside her. They did not say anything for a while. The machines were loud and purposeful. "They're building it back?" Petra asked. "Yes," Layla said. "The school too?" "The school first," Layla said. "That was in the agreement." Petra nodded slowly. She looked at the ground a while longer. Then she looked up at Layla. "Did it work?" she asked. "What Earth did it work?" Layla thought about the trial, the names read aloud for 4 hours, the verdict, the fleet coming home, the Dominion quiet, the galaxy watching. "Yes," she said. "It worked." Petra looked back at the machines. "Good," she said simply. In the council chamber, Mosaf presented his final report to the full assembly 6 months after the trial. The report was long and careful and covered everything: the attack, the human response, the tribunal, the outcome, the monitoring framework. But the part that was read most widely, the part that got quoted and debated and argued over for years afterward, was the last page. He wrote, "What the human species showed the galaxy in this period was not simply military strength. Many species have military strength. What they showed was something rarer, a principle, held without compromise, under enormous pressure, against very strong advice. That was the message. They showed us that there is a line, and that when you cross it, the response is not anger, and it is not chaos. It is something much harder to face. It is clarity. They knew exactly what they wanted. They went and got it. They came home. The galaxy will be thinking about this for a very long time." He closed the report. He looked around the chamber. The representatives of 17 species looked back at him. Nobody argued with the last page.